Hi Anti-Society, welcome back to the Anti-Social Planet, and today we are checking out the blog posts for Tower of God. So this is something that people have been telling me about in the comments since I think the first video I did for Tower of God, maybe like a couple of videos in, but people have told me that the author has a bunch of blog posts that go into a little bit more detail about certain things by chapter, and there's some other like lore and things like that. It kind of goes through some of the process of like making the webtoon, so I'm very interested in that. I always kind of dive into some of the more technical things of like making comics and stuff like that, and I love world building and all of that stuff, so I am excited to kind of dive into some of this. I don't know how much of it is actually going to make it into the final video. It'll really depend on what is important. I don't want to like just have awkward spaces where I am reading and don't really have much of a comment on stuff. I'm going to assume that you guys know the blog posts and what they say, so some of the blog posts might not make it into the final video just because I didn't really have anything to say about it, and that's why they're not there, but I've read them all. I kind of want to preface with that in case they don't make it in. But yeah, let's check out some of the blog posts, some world building stuff. I think there's a Q&A at some point. We'll find out. We'll find out what happens, but let's start with some of the blog posts and stuff. I'm excited just to see some of SIU's, I'm gonna say it that way, SIU's personality and kind of who he is, because I don't really know anything about SIU. I like that he's like both exciting and scary. I totally get that. There's something exciting about people getting to see something you've worked on, and also terrifying because you put so much of yourself into something that you create, especially a story. I feel like from like an art perspective, as someone who just like paints and draws and stuff like that, when I put out just like a drawing, it could be just something that I've made for a friend, you know, like a favorite character, or you know, something that they specifically would enjoy, or I'm just like doodling. I draw a lot to like de-stress, so sometimes it's not that there hasn't been a lot of myself put into like the composition of a piece of work. But then when I write stories, you put so much of yourself because you're pulling from your own experiences, and because you're putting that into the characters and the plotting, even if it is something fantastical, you're still putting so much of your own feelings and experiences into it that it is like exciting because you have put all of this time and work into it, but terrifying because it feels very vulnerable at the same time, because you know what parts are you, but other people don't. So it's, you feel like everyone can see it though. So I understand the exciting, but also scary. We did like it. I like that. I'm speaking like you can hear me. We did. I liked it. Ooh, I get redoing the first chapter too. I have so many times where like when I'm writing a story, I'll like delete the first sometimes and the second chapter that I wrote, and then whatever the start point is after that, that's like the new first chapter of my story. I write myself into stories. I don't know how SIU does it, but I always just kind of write my way into the world and the characters. So usually the first like 10 pages are deleted. I just throw them away because I'm like, that was me just trying to figure out what kind of tone I wanted for the story. It's kind of like the same with drawing, where I'll just do a bunch of sketches if I'm making something that's like more original than some of my stuff that I do that's just like anime characters that I like. I'll just do like a bunch of sketches, and usually the first like 5 or 6 sketches I do are thrown away before I actually find something that I like. So I understand going through multiple drafts of just trying to figure out the right way to start something, because then it's a lot easier. Like then you've kind of got a grasp of what you want the story to feel like, what you want the characters to feel like. The beginning of a story is like so important because it is like that first impression, but I like that he's talking about how you don't want to show too much, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with. Like the reason that I always delete like the first 10 pages of a story is because a thing that I learned when I was doing theater and when we had to like write our own skits and stuff, and the lesson that we always did was show up late, leave early. That was always what we wrote our scenes around, and that meant that you had to show up, you had to start the scene at like a little bit late than what you felt like you should, so you're like immediately into something happening, and it's something that's important, that's propelling the characters in the plot. And then you leave early in that you don't need to like finish everything in that scene. You don't need to tie everything up in a nice little bow. You need to leave a little bit earlier than you think that you should, and that's going to be the right spot, because you want people to either be interested in what the next scene is going to be, or you're just trying to have that one scene and finish your story within that, and you don't need to finish up every single detail that you introduced, because part of having something feel real and organic is having loose ends. You know, that's life. Not everything gets wrapped up in like a pretty package for you to like fully understand what was going on. So I like that he's talking about like, I didn't want to like put too much in it. I wanted to cut things out so that it was like enough to hook people in, but it wasn't giving away too much. So that's like a huge thing that you have to kind of struggle with, because I feel like people want to write their story and like really set up the world and the characters, and they end up doing too much, because what you're trying to introduce is the story, the actual plot, what's happening, and what's going to be propelling the rest of the action. We'll learn about the characters, we'll learn about the world. The action is what has to happen in that beginning. So I like that we're getting a little bit of insight about like what the beginning of the story was like, and kind of the struggles. I also understand the struggle of having to redraw a character because you've like changed something, or you wanted to like make something a little bit better. I've totally done that, where you've just like, you've done a bunch of panels and you've done all the inking and stuff, and then you're like, something's not right, I have to go back and change proportions or something. And it's a pain, but like you can't not do it. Really, Yuria and Baam are the hardest ones to draw. I mean, Yuria I get, because as someone who hates drawing hair, I totally get that. Because she does have like really long hair, and there's like the like clip thing in it, and she has kind of a lot of detailing on her outfit. I'm gonna say outfit because I said costume in my Bleach trailer reaction, and some people got bent out of shape about it. Apparently I can't say costume to refer to someone's clothing, but yeah, she has a lot of detailing on it, whereas like Baam, I wouldn't think. I guess you have to draw him a lot on account of being a main character, but I wouldn't have thought that he was a hardest character to draw. That's interesting. I haven't tried to draw him, so maybe that's why. Okay, to show what he's thinking. Yeah, I mean, Baam isn't like the most expressive either, just because of he's kind of an empty shell for the beginning. I feel like that'll shift a lot now that he's like been through some stuff, but at least at the beginning of the story he isn't super emotive, unlike someone like Shibitsu, right, who's like very animated in his expressions. But I feel like that's almost easier. It's sometimes easier to make like really exaggerated, like very cartoony expressions, because you can really push those expressions and have really bold lines and movement and stuff, whereas having more like minute, subtle expressions are a lot harder to pull off. I guess I understand that you have to like really emote through Baam because he's the main character, but he isn't over the top in a way that some of the other characters are. I totally understand having to redraw him though. I mean, a thing too is like when you're starting a story and you have new characters, you don't have the muscle memory yet to draw them. After a while, you draw a character enough times, you just get really good at it, and you can kind of do it really quickly, and you get really close to what your final like inking is going to be with the sketches. Whereas when you're starting a story, all of the characters are new, so it's just like really slow going. But once you actually get into the flow of like drawing a comic, it gets a lot faster, and you just kind of get to skip through a lot of the redrawing process because you get really good at it. Hey, I like that we get a little note here that's like, of course what Baam feels of Rachel is somewhat different from love, which I called super early on. I remember getting comments on like some of my first videos where people are like, actually the deconstruction I did of like the Rachel Baam relationship was a lot closer to what it was. I remember someone saying like a lot of the time people mistake it as like Baam being in love with her, and I was like, I don't think that that's what it is. I don't think it's a romantic thing. It might be like love in the twisted sense of like needing someone and being reliant on them, but it's not, I didn't see it as romantic, so look at me being intuitive sometimes. Boy, are there secrets hinting the rest of the story, which I found out at the end of the season. I feel like I have to go back. There are so many of like the little like chapter 0 and then the first couple of chapters. I feel like there's so much that I missed, and now I'd be like, oh, that was the thing. I like Hedon haters. Yeah, he's not super pleasant, is he? But at least he's genuine to who he is. So at least there's that. Maybe I'm just still in that feeling of betrayal, but I like when people are just who they are and they're not playing around, pretending to be someone they're not. Rachel. Oh, okay. I like the translation note of it referring to Hedon because it's kind of ambiguous. I mean, I've kind of talked about that too. I'm like, I don't know how much gender applies to all of the characters. And I know sometimes it's weird with the translation because characters will have like their gender will like switch depending on the translation, but I don't know how much it applies because like gender assumes that like the biology of a certain species is somewhat comparable to like humans and mammals and stuff like that, and it doesn't have to be in a fantasy world. So I've gotten tripped up with the genders a few times. I like the image of like an angel and a devil. I mean, the devil we're talking about, you know, the actual like biblical devil is also an angel, which I feel like people forget about, but the devil is a fallen angel, but still an angel. So I like the contrast of like, you know, Hedon being a kind of angel or like the guardians being a kind of angel. It's just a matter of, are you dealing with like a benevolent angel or a devil? Which kind of angel are you getting? Because either way, it's like a very powerful otherworldly creature, but are you getting like a nice one or a not nice one? And even the devil was like one of the like elite angels in heaven before falling. So it is one of those things where like they might shift. They might be benevolent at one point and then a devil the next. You don't really know what you're gonna get. I kind of like that imagery for the Guardians and Hedon in particular. I like getting all the breakdowns of like the cuts, which I'm assuming are like the panels, pages, certain sections. Because I know that like on webtoon anyway, there are like certain kind of like pages that your like continuous like strip kind of get cut down into. Okay, thank you, Magnus. Some of the spellings are different. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about the kun, which is sometimes spelled like the Khun, and then sometimes it's Koon, because again, it's originally in Hangul, so the spellings, the kind of romanized version is going to be different. I'm used to that though, as someone who like spends a lot of time watching like Japanese and even like South Korean media. I'm used to like even like actors spelling their name differently, but depending on the day, if they have to write it like romanized. So I'll figure it out. If I get confused, I'll ask. I feel like this is an important line of, I don't think length of work is equal, I'm gonna kind of translate it, but is equal to quality of work. Very, very important thing to keep in mind when you are creating something. People kind of think that the longer you spend on something, the higher quality it's gonna be, and that's not always the case. I mean, it kind of depends. Even like, you know, people think like longer works in general, so like a longer series, you know, if you think of a series that has lots of seasons, doesn't mean that all of those seasons are good, doesn't mean that the overall series is good, just means that there's a lot of seasons. Same with how long it takes to draw something. I've had it where I've spent hours, like so dozens of hours working on a piece and not come out with something that I particularly like or that got much attention or anything like that. And then I've spent like an hour doing something really quick and had lots of people love it. I've had that with some of my sketches that I post on like Instagram, like Kakashi. I've done a couple of Kakashi sketches and people love them. And I'm like, I don't know why, but here we are. I think it depends on the work itself. I think it depends on the substance of it, not how much like time you've put into something. Oh, I like that Rock is gonna show up because we love him. I love him. I know other people don't understand my love for Rock. I don't understand. Apparently I have a type. I get teased about it in the Discord quite often about how I have a affinity for the gentle giant character, even though Rock is still violent, but I tend to gravitate towards them. I have no idea why. I know, who doesn't understand liking Rock? I've had people comment on my videos that they're like, I don't understand why you like Rock so much. And I'm like, what do you mean? Have you seen him in chibi form? Look how cute. He's adorable. And he just wants to fight stuff. Again, I like a character who is genuine to who they are. Rock's always just himself, and I like that. I also like that we have this blog post that's just like, Kun is here at last. I feel like there should be like a parade or something because he's finally here. Yes, you should watch all of his words and actions carefully. He always has lots of stuff going on in his mind. There's always like a few different angles that he's figuring out. I like that SIU is like very forward about wanting to let the story breathe. I feel like I've had conversations with people in like the comments of my videos of people saying like, you know, it might be slow right now, but it's gonna like speed up and stuff like that. And I never had a moment where I felt like it was there was like filler or something. Like I never felt like we were like spending too much time on something. I'm always one to point that kind of stuff out. I see it. I'm not the kind of person to pull punches for that kind of a thing. I've watched a lot of shonen in my life. I know filler when I see it, and I never felt that with Tower of God. I always felt like there was very deliberate moments of breathing room and letting the characters have genuine reactions to things, because I think people forget that there's like when the action happens and you have like the immediate reaction to something going on, and then you have the recovery from that action. I like that we always got these moments after like the actual tests finished where we just got character moments where they're trying to recover from what happened. They're thinking through it, they're discussing it with each other, they're trying to process what they went through and what they're going to do next and what it means for who they are as like part of the team or going through the tower, and even just taking moments to explore the world and leave hints about other stuff going on. I never felt like that was, you know, kind of like waffling, trying to buy time and stuff like that, like trying to fill out the chapter so that, you know, you could get something published that week. I always felt like SIU had like very deliberate reasons for saying, okay, now we're going to take some time and, you know what that character is doing or backstory or something like that. Like I'm thinking specifically, we had the one chapter, maybe it's because it's recent in my brain, but we had the one chapter that was like silent, where there weren't like speech bubbles and stuff until the end. And to some people that might feel like something that's just filler, like padding or something, but for me it was like a wonderful moment of just letting the characters breathe and going through this kind of moment of calm and silence before stuff really picked up again. It was a really interesting way of doing that because it was a limited way of storytelling, but I feel like it was necessary, of just very calm panels, not focusing on dialogue between characters, discussions and stuff like that. It was just them interacting with each other and the world and like having a moment. So I like that SIU is kind of talking about deliberately doing that, of wanting to set up parts of the story, especially in the first season where like you really have to set up everything. You have to set up the world, the plot, the characters, like everything is new to the reader. So you need to have those moments where you can just like let the story give a little bit of information and then let both the characters and the reader process it. Also, this line right here, I love rock. Me too. I should get a t-shirt or something. A mug, which is like a little chibi rock on it. Honestly, I would do that. I feel like there are so many inside jokes from the different series I've done for the channel, or like things that we've talked about on the channel, that if I got a t-shirt or a mug for all of them, I would just have too much. As much as it would be fun, it would be too many mugs. Yeah, and it says like, while most characters in Tower of God hide their pain and past, Rock shows himself as he is openly. Yeah. Totally agree. Maybe that's why people question why Rock is my favorite character, is they're like, he feels simplistic because he's open. Like there isn't a bunch of mystery. There aren't like, you know, things that you have to try and like read. You know, like Kun, where you have to like, he'll say something and you have to like read a bunch of different possibilities of what exactly that means. Rock just says what he says and means what he means, and he just is. And I feel like people take that as simplicity, but it isn't. It's just him being genuine and knowing who he is and just letting that be. And I feel like that's why I like him, because I never question him. You know, I never question why he's saying something the way he is or what he wants. And I feel like those are just people that I'm drawn to in general. Like even in real life, I like people that are just genuinely themselves, because I feel like I'm pretty good at sensing when someone is like hiding something from me, and I just like, I don't know what it is, but I just like feel weird. Don't we all love people who are just like genuine and are just themselves, and they'll change over time, but you always know that what you see is what you get. And I think that's why I like Rock, because it's never a puzzle with him. Plus he's really adorable. I like how we're talking about like the simplicity of Rock, and then Hong Sung, who is like a whole puzzle. The layers to Hong Sung. I never know what Hong Sung is thinking, or what the motive is, or what the next action is gonna be. There's always a bunch of things going on. Huts. I'm trying to like remember where we are. Is this the initial test? We're there. It must be, because it says like Rock showed up, Kun, Rock. So it must be the initial like battle royale test thing where they had to get teams. Ah, okay. I don't think I ever looked at what Anak was wearing and I thought it was hanbok. I don't think I ever read that. So I'm glad that I was correct in not thinking that, because it didn't seem quite the right cut, like silhouette for hanbok. I feel like it would be weird to have it in like a combat setting, because hanbok is very like ceremonial, right? I don't fully know the entire background of like when hanbok is worn, so I might be incorrect about that, but it does feel more, I don't know, I feel like it's more like celebrations and like positive kind of situations. So I don't think like Anak would wear something like that in like a combat setting. Maybe there are settings where you would wear it for combat or like war or something. I don't know. Someone who knows more about Korean culture can definitely educate me on that. Ooh, I like that it says the characters they don't have like an exact appearance of a particular country or like culture or something. There are a huge mixture of like different cultures and different languages and stuff depending on the family and the character and stuff like that, which I love, because I think it just adds a bunch of depth. Because if you had all of the characters with references to just like South Korean culture and history and stuff like that, then it would feel a lot smaller, right? The tower would feel smaller because it would be all of these people that have the same basic background. Whereas having all these different cultures, it feels like a whole world because you have incorporated all of these different cultures and languages and things into it. So I like that they're kind of ambiguous with like what country or culture they come from, because I feel like it just adds more layers. Because even someone like me, like I have like Celtic heritage, and that's like a specific culture and language and different dress and stuff like that. But then I also have like French, and you know, that's like a different culture, and there's some crossover, but it's also different. And even something between like Welsh heritage and like Irish heritage, both Celtic, different language, you'd get like way different names for things. So I like that there's, you know, even people have this mixture of like cultures and backgrounds and things like that. So I like that even the characters feel diverse in the way that they're represented, because there's all this other stuff being mixed together. Oh, I like how we have the Kun is named after a soccer player, which I knew. Someone put it in the comments for me. Isn't it related to the colors of like the Kun family? Is like the country of the soccer player or the colors of the team or something? I don't know soccer, so that is why I am vague about this, because I don't sports anymore. Ooh, try drawing lines thicker for battle scenes. Now I feel like I have to go back and look at that. That's a cool design thing, because it adds like weight to the actions and makes them feel more exaggerated, which I feel like for like really action heavy things, when there's like a lot of aggression and passion behind a movement, having thicker lines is a cool detail to add. Was Tower of God like somewhere else? I'm assuming, because I feel like there's been a few mentions from CU of like things changing or like redrawing things. So I'm assuming it was posted somewhere else, and then when it was being posted to Webtoon, he like went back through it. Ah, okay, it was for a competition. Interesting. Okay, so best challenge, I guess? I went straight to crown game for fear the story being loose. Okay, so he like skipped a bunch of stuff to get to the crown game for the competition, which makes sense because I've had it where I've like, for like writing competitions of a story, I've like shortened something down because you have to like reach a specific like word cutoff. So I'm like, okay, I want to condense this into like a very specific story. And then later I kind of expand it out into something more because I'm not trying to like fit into the competition guidelines. That kind of explains why he might have been anxious about the story feeling slow, because if you cut out a bunch of stuff for like a competition and then you get contacted to do a webtoon, you probably feel like your story is like good enough in that form, but you want to add other stuff in because you're going to be continuing the story and expanding on things. You need to set up stuff, but then if you're adding in things, you might fear that like you're messing up the pacing that you originally had. I like, for those who found the foreshadowing, you are a genius. He is adorable. I agree. See, I feel like I'm like trying to remember back through comments. Wasn't CU doing military service at some point while working on this? So that would probably affect like his ability to actually work on stuff. Oh, struggles with his health. Okay. That's sad. I feel like that happens a lot. How many comic artists are out there that just have like health struggles, which is sad. And I don't know if it's like if you have some kind of health issue, then it's easier to work on something like a comic, or if it's, let's face it, the stress of making comics, comic book industry, like comics, manga, manhwa, especially like manga and manhwa. Well, I actually don't know about manhwa, but manga industry is stressful. Like they do not get paid enough and they work crazy hours and there are like almost impossible deadlines, and it's kind of terrifying to actually look into. Comics, like Western comics, is like slightly better, but it kind of depends on the company and what story you're in charge of. Okay, he finished military service. I mean, maybe it was like he started it during military service. I don't remember. I'm just taking comments that people sent me and trying to put pieces together, like reverse engineer it. I know a little bit about how the South Korean military service thing works. I grew up in a military town. We have like a military base here, and there's like tons of people who like live on base, like kids who have parents in the military. And then I know lots of people that I went to high school with who like immediately went into the military afterwards. So I know like a little bit about what it's like to go through military service, but it isn't mandatory in Canada. So it's slightly different, but it is like a closer, it's like 2-year kind of program, which is close to the South Korean one. It kind of depends on the program you're in, like what part of the military you're in. But interesting that it's Navy. My grandfather was also in the Navy, so he has some crazy stories. He was in a submarine, like submerged during the Cuban Missile Crisis, so he had some stressful time while being in the Navy. Oh yeah, and there's a ton of aquatic themes in this, and he's in the Navy. That's so cool. So I guess like, yeah, we would have like a lot of training and like experience with, you know, like aquatic kind of things. So that's cool. See, this is why I was like kind of okay with us going through stuff together. I like having some backup when I'm going through things, because you guys are way more knowledgeable about this than I am. How old was CU at this point? Because there's just a note about going to school, and I'm just curious. Aw. All of the doubt though of like, I don't know if it's good enough. I understand that too. I always joke with like my brother about my drawings and stuff, and I say like, I never get to a point where I actually think something is finished. I just get to a point where I'm so angry at the piece for not being what it was in my head that I just stop. And then I move on to the next thing, which is why I never spend much time like looking over my stuff. I'll spend like the next day after I like finish a work, after I give up on it, I like either put it up on a wall where I see it all the time, or I like make it the background of my phone so I see it all the time to like critique it and make notes and stuff, and then I forget about it. I like don't remember most of the things that I draw because I get frustrated that it isn't what I wanted it to be. So I totally get thinking that something isn't good enough. Okay, it's 23:24. Hey, like me, reading it. Look at that sink. Oh no, a motorcycle riding into a car. My goodness, there's a lot of things happening. Like school, some money stuff, car accident. It's very eventful. I hope he's okay. Sometimes life happens. It seems to happen all at once a lot of the time. Like things will be super quiet and then everything will happen. I dislike works done in a hurry. Yeah, same. I've definitely had it where I've been commissioned to do something and you just have to get something done in a certain amount of time, and you always seem to like figure out a way to do it, but you don't have time to really like stop and critique things and like look over it. So you always feel like you could have done more because you don't go through that process of like sketching something and then you kind of sit on it and make sure it is the way that that you want it to be. And a lot of the time I'll like draw something and then I'll leave it and like for a day or two and then come back and look at it, because it's kind of hard when you've spent like 10 hours working on something to like actually be able to see it at that point. So you have to like walk away and come back to it. But when you have a deadline, you just have to keep working. So it does sometimes, even if it is like some of your best work, or if there wouldn't have been much of a difference if you had gone slower, it still feels like you should have done more because you didn't have that kind of those steps in the process. At least he's getting to a point where it's like the crown game now, which is basically finished, you know, and you just have to kind of add things, probably redraw some stuff so that it fits a new style. You just might want to redraw stuff anyway, because you, like I said, you get muscle memory with drawing characters, you get better at it. So sometimes you like end up redrawing stuff even though you like inked it out ahead of time. Boy, is season 1 about the innocent protagonist before things just get tossed upside down. I'm still mad about it. It's been like a week or like 2 weeks even since the whole Rachel moment, and I'm still mad. I think I will continue to be mad. Rachel's gonna have to do something spectacular to make me forgive her in any way. I get the whole wrist and eyes hurting too from someone who's done a bunch of drawing for like an occupation. It's amazing how like I love drawing, and like I said, I do it all the time to de-stress, to like turn off my brain for a little while, but then when you do it for a living, it becomes very, very stressful. Okay, Hansung's clothes aren't hanbok either. See, that Hansung's clothes seem closer to hanbok from my small experience of that. I want to stress that my knowledge of South Korean culture is limited to my Western upbringing. I totally get having to check your wrists too. Like when you use it so much that it starts to like get all weird. I mean, I have it where I actually, like, I don't know what I did to my wrist, but basically when I was like 14, I got tackled to the ground and I fell on my wrist weird. And I say I don't know what happened to it because I never got it checked out, but basically I have like a weird, I don't know, almost like ache in the joint of my wrist. It's like not even that it's painful, it just like feels weird when I use my wrist too much. Is why I can't like, I don't like doing like push-ups and stuff like that, because it's like having weight on this side does something weird to my wrist. And then of course like drawing for long periods of time do weird things to my wrist. So like I totally get having weird injuries. It doesn't help that I broke my fingers on this hand quite a few times too, so I actually can't like grip my fingers closed all the way, so like drawing is weird sometimes. Just you know, take care of yourself. I like it's getting hot in season 1 at last. Yeah, no, the crown game is where things really started to shake up, isn't it? Wow, the 10 chapters full of fight scenes making your head hurt. Yeah, I get that. Drawing fight scenes can be intimidating because there's so much action, right? You have to draw so many panels of like transitioning that action, as opposed to something dialogue heavy where you can kind of have like a stagnant panel with multiple speech bubbles to like go through the conversation a lot quicker. Did people not recognize Kun when he tied his hair back? I remember him becoming Team Ponytail because I appreciated it as a fellow member. I try to refrain from saying this is the answer, which is something that has come up quite a few times in like comments where people are like, sometimes there just isn't an answer to something. Like we don't actually know what something means. And I think you guys were talking a little bit in the Patreon Discord too about like even getting into some of the notes and like blog posts and stuff, is that some of it's like not necessarily canon, it's just like hints at stuff that might happen, or like what people have interpreted of what they think like certain notes mean, because it's still an ongoing story, right? We don't have all of the answers. And even like this saying, like I try to refrain from just like saying this is what this means. I like having kind of that open-endedness. It means that like the reader gets to participate in the story, right? You get to decide what the story means to you and pull from your own experiences, and it means that it gets to be unique for each person who reads it, but you still end up at the same place. Like no one gets confused or lost or anything like that. So I like it. I enjoy it. So there are some of the blog posts that got changed around. That is the problem with kind of doing something in like a series where you're like still writing stuff as you go along, because you change things. You change your mind because you kind of like have an outline. You usually have an idea of what the ending is going to be like, and then you get into the story and you start to change things because you come up with a different idea, or you discover that you have some kind of problem or plot hole that you need to take care of, and so things shift and change, or you learn something different about like what you want the character to be. So kind of like posting stuff that's like, hey, this is kind of what this is gonna be, or hinting at what this is gonna be, and then having to like go back and change your mind later. It's like a lot different from having a whole story and you finish writing it and then you go back and you edit your way through it. Oh, I totally get wanting someone to model for you, because sometimes you're like looking for a specific reference for a specific pose and you're just like scrolling through a bunch of pictures trying to find someone who matches, like not only the like placement of like someone's body and limbs and stuff, but you're looking for the right like angle of like the camera and the framing. You're looking for like like the weight being placed in the right place, especially if you're doing fight scenes where weight shifts around depending on the move and stuff like that. So I totally get wanting someone to just be like, can you just like pose exactly like this at this angle so I can see it? I like the PS. Some said this chapter is short. I hope you were joking. I get that. Where like some people are like, oh, this is like a shorter chapter, and you put like so much work into it and you're just like, short? Excuse me? Yeah. I get that like publishing kind of outlines and stuff might not be the best in like retrospect because you end up like changing things around and stuff like that, but I also think it's nice to kind of get to see the process. Like I like seeing these blog posts that like, you kind of get to see the mindset that the author was going through throughout the process. I also like just getting to see like sketches and like roughed out ideas for stories and that and stuff like that. I think that's one of the cool things about creators having access to the internet and stuff like that, is that you get to share so much more of what goes through, and I feel like it demystifies the process a lot. I feel like we kind of see the finished product of an artist or creator and we think we know how that works. If you only get to see like the polished parts of it, then you think like, oh, this person is just like super talented and I could never do that because I couldn't just like sit down and draw a whole sketch of a scene and get it right the first time. But then you have someone where you see them and they have like 10 different sketches of the same panel and you're like, oh, that makes sense to me, of like having to draw something over and over and over again and make mistakes, and even like see you being like, you know, talking about like having wrist pain from drawing a lot. I'm like, yeah, that happens. Like that's what happens when you're an artist and you spend hours and hours a day drawing and going over the same things over and over again. You get wrist pain. So I kind of like that it feels attainable, right? Like I like being able to show people of like, this is how something works and this is the process of it, because then other people feel like they can be part of it if they want to, or at least like get to kind of see behind the curtain, right? I don't know. I like it, but I'm also a creator, so I guess I have like a vested interest in getting to see people draw things and make things because it validates my own experiences. Oh my gosh, this though, of him saying it looked good when I did it in black and white, but coloring was hard. I feel that. I am so bad at introducing color into things. I actually have it where a lot of the time I will like do all the shading and like coloring in of something in monochrome, so it'll just be black and white, it'll be like grayscale. And then I just put a filter over it because I do digital art, and then I just paint over it in like whatever color I want so that like the shaded parts stay shaded and stuff like that, so I don't have to go in and shade stuff with a color palette because I'm so bad. So at least that way it's like a block color. I'm like, I want this to be red, and then because I already did the shading gradient in like grays, I can just color over it in red and it'll look like it's all shaded and nice, and I don't have to figure out colors. It's the best thing. Digital art is so much more friendly for me as someone who struggles with mixing colors. Traditional media is like the bane of my existence with color. I do almost exclusively black and white in traditional media. It's all inking and like pencil work because color is too hard for me most of the time. Aw, the little disappointed that people seem to be aren't talking about the action, but are more interested in like the length of it. Aw, I talked about the action. I can't remember what I said during chapter 16, but I go on length about how to choreograph action stuff. I hope that I commented on it just for his sake, so that he knows someone cares. I understand the effort that goes into action scenes. Have I worked with charcoal drawings before? Yeah, I've done a lot of charcoal drawings. Charcoal, chalk, I've done pretty much every medium of art between years of doing art. So I started doing art related things in, I don't know, a more like structured sense when I was 6. That's kind of where my art career started. I don't know if I want to tell the story because I don't want to flex. I don't want to seem like I'm, you know, bragging or something, but yeah, when I was 6, I started to actually get into like formal training of art. So I tried out a bunch of different mediums and stuff, including charcoal. And then when I started teaching art, I had to kind of go into some of the more like proper ways of doing some things because I had to kind of untrain some of my habits so that I could teach people how to work with stuff. I haven't done charcoal in a really long time though. It's not my favorite because it's very messy. Yeah, I used to do it when I would go out, like walk around, and I had to just like draw different landscapes and stuff to like submit to my teacher. So I used to just do charcoal because it was easier to kind of carry around. You just needed like the one charcoal thing and like your thumb to like blend stuff out. And it was like, charcoal is like pretty thick lines, so you couldn't go into a lot of detail. It kind of forced me to be really quick and loose with my sketches as opposed to like a pencil where I tended to get way too detailed. I'd spend way too much time, you know, working on like trees and plants and stuff. But it's been a while since I did charcoal. I don't know if I could do it now very well. I think some of that training is out of my head. I love that the note for chapter 17 is just, Lorray should go back to sleep. I'm sure he wants to. Ooh, we're almost getting to Anok's story. Anok the second, Junior, the child. I think I remember talking about how there were other ignition weapons other than the 13-month ones. I feel like that came up at some point. Ooh, I like the thing where it's like the 13-month series are good but not the best. I feel like that's something I have to keep in mind. I think that there might be the best we've seen up to this point. I've seen up to this point, but interesting to acknowledge they're not the best overall, that we're gonna see some other cool things once we probably meet like other rankers and irregulars and stuff, which I'm nervous about. Oh, Yuri herself uses better weapons than Black March. Fascinating. I would like to come back to that. Oil paintings are really, really hard. I feel like I did oil painting just enough to pass my classes because I had to, but I don't remember ever intentionally using oil paint because it's really hard and it takes forever to dry. And I'm just not patient enough. I use a lot of pens and markers because they're simple, they're portable, and they dry really fast. Important culture there, 13 months. Do I remember all the stuff about 13 months? I don't know if I do. I remember asking about it at some point. Maybe it just went over my head. Does it have to do with the like lunar calendar instead? Because I know that South Korea has New Year's at a different point than like the 12-month calendar that like I grew up with. They have like the New Year's that's like December 31st, and then they have like a different New Year's, like a lunar New Year's later. Maybe it's something to do with that. I feel like I'm taking forever to go through these posts, and I apologize. I really didn't feel like I would spend this much time on them. Doesn't help that I'm a slow reader. I like that. P.S. Some fun stuff about Korean grammar. I feel like there were some notes on that, or like somebody commented about it. I feel like I remember going through some stuff that was like play on words, but in the Korean. I totally get telling people to not post spoilers. I have that too. Luckily, my community's watching out for me and making sure I don't run into any spoiler comments. I don't think I've ever had any problems, like people posting spoilers and me like running into them. I think I've always had it where people have either marked them as spoilers or someone has like commented on a comment, like replied to it and said that it's a spoiler. I've never had anything spoiled for me in Tower of God, so good job Tower of God fandom, keeping my comment section clean of spoilers, because I've had it with other series where people have spoiled things and I'm just like, why don't you mark it? I don't mind if you put spoil at the beginning of your comment and then say whatever you want to say, because then I won't read it. I like how he's like, I have some mail in English. Crazy. Yes. I like he won't say anything about scans of Tower of God in other countries. He's like, I saw nothing. Fan translations. This is something that I have with like manga too, where it's so hard to get an official translation or like a digital copy of something, and I don't know why. Like at least Webtoon has like a built-in kind of translation setting where they have like people to go through and translate things and have like an official post of it, whereas like there are so many manga companies that just don't, and then they get mad when, you know, scans show up online with fan translations, and I'm like, I would like to give you my money to give me an English translation of this, but you will not give me English translation, so I will go somewhere else. So here we are with fan translations and scans on the internet. I know they talk about wanting like better sales for the physical copy, but I'm like, I can't get a physical copy if I live somewhere that isn't Japan. So I would like a digital copy, please. Aw, I like having a little fanboy moment of like great authors. I get that. I have like favorite authors where I'm just like, if I could ever talk to them, I would just like melt. Aw, I hate finding grammar mistakes later, like after you've posted something or you've submitted something and then you see it and you're like, dang it. I think they were getting some of the magic system stuff, because some of this I already know because people have talked about it in the comments, but I assume that this is where they got it from. So I like that he's kind of going through to like clarify stuff, because I feel like that's like actually being active in like people commenting and stuff, because if you actually address things to like clarify them, then I feel like it encourages people to like ask questions and post on things because they know that they're like gonna get answered. This is something that I've ran into recently where people have like DM'd me or put a comment on my videos and they're like, not that you're gonna see this or something. Like people believe that I'm not gonna see that they've DM'd me or left a comment on my video, and I'm like, yeah, I see all of it and I'll probably respond. So yeah, I like that he's kind of like acknowledging certain things and like clarifying and kind of helping people understand the whole thing, because that's how I understand stuff. I read your guys' comments and then I know what's going on a lot better. This is where we got the full backstory of Kun, or like some more stuff into why he wants to help Baam. I'm like trying to remember what chapter, like what part of the story corresponds to the chapters. I totally get sleep patterns being messed up because you're uploading stuff. I have that all the time. Sometimes it takes just a short time for things to upload, like videos on my channel to upload, and then other times things get messed up and weird and I have to like wait for stuff to work. I totally get your work messing up sleep patterns. I like that note of Baam does not push his justice or friendship into others. And I think that that's an interesting thing about Baam, is that Baam is very like passive in the sense of he wants people to like him and he doesn't want to like inconvenience people, but he doesn't like actively go after friendships or relationships with people. They just like latch on to him. People are just attracted to his personality, and I think it goes to like how genuine he is as well. Like I was saying before about how you're just like drawn to people who are authentically themselves. There's something so pure about who Baam is, and it's so contrastive to who everyone else is in the tower, or like who the characters have come into contact with before. And he doesn't like actively try to make people be his friend. They just feel themselves wanting to protect him and wanting to spend time with him. We have that with like Endorsey. You know, Baam didn't try to make Endorsey his friend. It just kind of happened. So I like that idea of like Baam doesn't doesn't like push that on people. They just kind of voluntarily decide that they're going to help him out. Season 1 does have a large cast. That's like a really hard thing to do. I feel like it happened very organically. I feel like SIU did a really good job of like starting with it being very Baam focused. And then we got a little bit wider with like Kun and Rock, and then a little bit wider with like Shibitsu, Anak, Hats. Like it slowly built out to having all these different characters and like taking the time to like thread together enough of a backstory that you understood the personalities and the motivations of each of those characters, to the point where like by the end of the season there are so many characters. But it must have been really hard to like draw all of that and keep up with it, and to be able to balance between all of the different characters and different, you know, motivations that are contributing to each of the tests and each of the different actions that take place. I won't do that in my next webtoon. Mood though. You're just like, I've tried it, it's difficult, I'm not doing it again. I like Twitter, I've been avoiding for fear that I will speak of me speaking nonsense. I mean, isn't that all of Twitter? Twitter is mostly nonsense, so you'd fit right in. I didn't aim to be an author. Mood, I don't know if any of us ever choose. I mean, I did choose writing. I didn't choose being an artist though. I was just kind of thrown into it. Like I said, I was really young, and it just kind of happened, and here I stay, I guess. Not that I don't love it, but it definitely wasn't like a dream I had as a kid. It was just circumstances lining up and being in the right place at the right time, and now I do art things. I get like saying like not like the work has not changed much. It's like you get more attention, but it doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't sink in really. I don't really get attention from my comics because I always do ghostwriting. I don't get credited for it, so I don't know that part. But from a YouTuber perspective, it is weird. It's like my channel is so much bigger now than it was a year ago, or even like a matter of months ago, but like making videos doesn't feel different, even though there's like more comments to go through, more like DMs and stuff like that. Like you can see the attention, but it doesn't change like the basic method of making videos and stuff like that. I hope I continue to be the same. I hope that I never get to a point where the attention changes me, because honestly I don't like it very much. I get lots of comments of people saying like, your channel's gonna get huge or it's gonna blow up, or you know, just wait until you really make it. And I'm like, I am an introvert and I have anxiety about people noticing me, so I don't mind having a slow growth. I think my channel growing significantly really fast, like kind of that like viral moment, would freak me out so much. I don't think I would like it. I like that it's taken a very long time for my channel to get to like 1,000 subscribers and beyond, because yeah, I'm not good with attention. I'm like, it freaks me out. Ooh, I like the metaphor though of like sitting in a gigantic chair, your feet won't touch the floor, right? I think that's a really cool metaphor of like, you want to stay grounded, right? That's always what people say, you want to stay grounded. And if you're sitting in a position where your feet can't touch the ground, then you won't be grounded anymore. You're kind of stuck, suspended in this place of attention and being seen as separate from people who aren't sitting in that position that you are. It's very important to, I think, stay grounded and stay genuine and kind of remember why you're doing things. I think if you just chase the attention, it can become very convoluted, very, very muddy, and I think it takes some of the joy out of it, because there's always a higher number to hit, right? Like there's always more views, there's always more likes, there's always more shares, there's always more comments, there's always another number to try and hit. So if all you're focused on is the attention, I feel like you'll never get to like an actual goal. You'll never finish something, because there'll always be the next one. Hung Sung is dark inside. Yes, he is. Good observation. Hung Sung is very dark. It's hidden behind a very mischievous exterior where Hung Sung can be kind of playful, but do not let it distract you from the darkness. Yes, we have Hwan Ruk. Ryuk. I don't know if I'm going to say her name properly, but yes, I remember leotard or tights, as we were saying here. She is beautiful though. Well, there's the long flowing locks, also kind of mischievous though. Basically Hung Sung's insider made from coffee. Yes, I agree. See, I always thought that we're like, I don't like coffee. I'm gonna be upfront with you guys. I am not a coffee person. Literally nothing about it appeals to me. I don't like the smell, I don't like the taste, I don't like the way it makes me super jittery instead of just like more awake. But like so many people like coffee that I'm like, I was gonna try it, you know, I was gonna figure out what the hype was about, and then to be just like disappointed by the bitter taste of it, I feel like that's like Hung Sung, where I had an expectation that was gonna be positive and wonderful, and then the result was just bitterness and disappointment and confusion. I like how there's just like a soccer moment of like Liverpool. One of my best friends is a Liverpool fan, so I hear about Liverpool a lot, and I don't understand any of it, but he keeps me up to date. The whole like list of like making a list of like characters and stuff so you don't forget things or get messed up. Totally understand that. You always get like a huge document for like referencing where you're like, okay, what characters have we already introduced, so that you can like reuse characters instead of like inventing new ones or forgetting to put characters in the background of shots and stuff stuff like that. You don't want to forget if you have all of like your characters gathered in a scene, you know, like before a test or something like in this one, and you've forgotten one of the regulars because someone like me will ask about it. I do a head count, you know, I try to remember where everyone is. And then when you deliberately leave out a character, that's a hint, right? That's because someone's doing something else behind the scenes. I like the admission of like, some people think that I'm like making this, I like have everything ready, and I don't. Like, I get that. I get being like, you gotta make it seem like you know a lot more about what's going on to your readers, but you're really just like making stuff up as you go along and filling in blanks. You just gotta make it seem like you knew what you were doing all along. Was that there's like a Neil Gaiman quote where someone's like, how do I write a story or something? And his response was, you write everything down that could possibly happen, and then you go back and make it seem like you knew what you were doing the whole time. Yes, that is the way of making a story. Uh-oh, short rant. We went from soccer to rant. Okay, the first manga I ever bought was Dragon Ball. Hey! I remember the Dragon Ball references. I remember wearing my Dragon Ball sweater and people asking me if it was a Hung Sung reference and stuff, and I'm like, nah, it's Dragon Ball. I remember the Dragon Ball references. I like that Dragon Ball is canon in the Tower of God world. As someone who grew up watching Dragon Ball, I approve. I had to use a complicated war plan to do it. I totally get that. I mean, I couldn't really buy manga growing up because I wasn't really around, but I remember my mom would go to the grocery store and there was a magazine section that had some comic books, like Western comics, and I would be like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay by the magazine section. It's like by the cash. Just, you know, just wait while you do your grocery shopping. And then I would sit down like on the floor, like reading comics because I couldn't buy them because I was like a kid. I didn't have like pocket money and stuff. So it was like my way of like reading like Batman comics and X-Men and stuff, was just like reading as many as I could at the grocery store, whatever was there. I never had any connected stories. I just read whatever I could get. Even like watching Dragon Ball, it was just whatever was on television, whatever episode it was. If I was allowed to watch it, I would just watch whatever was there. I would watch whatever anime I could get my hands on. Different time before I could just like look stuff up on the internet. You had to like find physical copies of stuff. Oh, I like the like I did it. I just like bought it without knowing what it was. Totally did that. I would buy like physical copies of anime like on DVD. I had no idea what it was, but I just was like at like a movie store, which is like probably a weird thing to lots of young kids, but there used to be a thing called like Blockbuster and things like that, where you would like go to like the video rental place, or you would go to like video stores, and I would find an anime. There'd be like maybe 5, and if I found a new one, I would take it home. Like I would try to buy it, or I would rent it and I would take it home. I had no idea what it was, and I would just watch it because that's like what I had. That's like how I saw Evangelion. I had no idea what Evangelion was, and boy was it a trip. It was like the anime I could get a hold of, so I watched it. I also get like rewatching stuff. Like I think that's part of the reason I've seen Fullmetal Alchemist so many times, is because we actually had the DVDs available and my brother bought them, and I remember watching them over and over and over again because like I had a physical copy of it, especially like the first like 12 episodes, because that was like the first set of DVDs, was like the first 12 episodes, and that was like the only one we had for like a year or something. So I just like watched those first 12 episodes over and over again because that's what I had. Now I can't keep up with it. There's so many new shows and I'm just behind on everything. Even like comics, like webtoon now. There's so many webtoons I could be reading because there's just so many of them now. But like back in the day, it was just like whatever tiny section of like manga was available at like bookstores. I like that he like stumbled upon Dragon Ball, because same, I just like watched whatever was on Adult Swim and stuff, whatever it was. I was just like, I'm gonna watch it. I like that he got to visit his family though. I feel like it's easy to get caught up in work. I say as someone who's like kind of a workaholic, I like to be working. I'll probably complain about it, but I like to be working. I expect this to take like 50 chapters. Boy, did it. I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, all this stuff happened like really early on, and then we spent so much time with like the lead up to the end of the season. I'm like remembering now. Yeah, I remember the like old, like they had to like hunt down like Dragon Ball things. I remember early days of YouTube where there would be like fan subs of stuff on YouTube. There'd be like whole episodes of anime that were just like subbed, kind of like fan translations for manga, back before like YouTube had like a ton of like copyright like filters and stuff. You could watch like whole series of anime because people would just sub them and put them up on YouTube. Like that's how I got into, that's one of the reasons I got into YouTube all the way back in like 2009, which makes me feel old, but that's like how I ended up finding YouTube for the majority of it, was because there were anime subs on YouTube. This makes me nostalgic. Yeah, you used to be able to watch like I mean, I didn't watch Naruto on YouTube, but I think that's how I watched Soul Eater. I think I watched Soul Eater on YouTube all the way back in the day. I like how it's like Anak is Endorsee's niece, but Anak is older. Did I know that Anak was older than Endorsee? I don't know if I did. I like how, and the tower age is meaningless. I'm like, it is though. I feel like that's why it didn't stick in my brain. I'm like, there are people who are like hundreds of years old, and then people who are super young, and I don't know how much it matters. Oh, there are probably still some anime on YouTube, especially like older ones too, where the copyright is kind of ambiguous, but it used to be all over the place. Like there were whole channels where you could watch like every single episode. Whereas like now, I mean, I can't even react to Bleach Abridged sometimes without getting a copyright. And I'm like, how? It's like 5 episodes chopped up into like 10 minutes and none of the audio is the same. I don't know any of the informal speech stuff because it doesn't really translate well in English. We don't have like a formal language really. There's like certain terminology that you use in certain contexts, but it's pretty informal. Unless you get into like actual slang and stuff, which doesn't really show up in written works. Whereas I know like Korean has like a more obvious distinction between like formal and informal. And it's a little more precise of like, it's really, really rude to talk informally with people unless you know them really well. So I didn't really get all of that nuance, which I'm kind of thought about as a language nerd. But again, I don't know Korean well enough for it to be, I guess, useful for me to actually read the story. I like how it's like mind age is more important. Like there's like mind age and body age and they're different for people. I totally get that being something in like a magical world where people live for a lot longer as like Shinsu users and stuff, that there's definitely a difference between like someone's appearance and then like how old they actually are. I like, but screwed up is the Jahad family or Sahard family, depending on the spelling. Yeah, it is. I agree. They're not the most stable of people. I like the note here of like talking about Endorsey of like a girl who is yet to mature fully. I feel like that really shows like who Endorsey is at this point because she is kind of flippant and she seems kind of shallow and impulsive and kind of sporadic in how she feels about things, and I'm just like thinking back to that and then who she is like later on at the end of season 1, and I'm sure will only continue to develop. She's come so far. I have so much pride for Endorsey's like growth over the first season that it's, you know, it's kind of like contrasting to like what she was like and then how she becomes is like really interesting to me. There's such an obvious shift when you look at it from like when she's introduced to what she's like at the end of the season. You don't notice it in the moment really because it's such a gradual thing over such a long period. But I think I'm gonna end it there for today because my voice is tired. I'm almost out of water. Yeah, fun to go through the blog post. I feel like I focused in a little bit more on like kind of the art and creator process for that. I think a lot more than going into some of the plot things because I find it interesting to see people's process and like the thoughts that went through someone's head as they were creating something. As someone who creates stuff and creates comics, I always find that interesting to kind of see their experience compared to my own and stuff like that. Fun kind of going through being reminded of some of the earlier chapters and some of the stuff that was going on. I said I was going to go through like some predictions. I feel like I kind of sprinkled those in, but I feel like it might be better with later chapters, so like the second half, to kind of go through predictions of what I think is going to happen. I really didn't think it would take this long. I hope you enjoyed going through some of this with me. I'll put my playlist to the actual webtoon stuff here so that you can go and check out my reactions to all the chapters if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!